Hey, this is Malika of Evanston Live TV, and I want to welcome everyone to the 2021 Mayoral debate. Yes, we have been waiting for this night. This is a night to really get to know the candidates. And you know what? With the questions, they're going to help you to get to know their opponent. And because we don't know these people like inside out, some of you may know them personally, some of us don't. Some of us just don't even know who we're voting for yet. Tonight is the night you'll get to learn a lot more about them. So thank you for joining us here at Evanston Live TV and staying in tune with us and engaging these forums and the one-on-one interviews, getting to know these candidates. Thank you so much. And I want to thank our sponsor tonight, Keith Terry of Kappa Alpha Psi. Welcome, welcome, Keith.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. I'd like to, should I go? I'd like to thank the candidates, those folks that are running for mayor. Thank you for stepping out and serving the city of Evanston. I'd like to thank all of the folks that are listening and tuning into tonight because it really is about voter education. Malika, thank you of Evanston Live TV. My name is Keith Terry, and I'm here representing my fraternity, the Evanston Alumni Chapter of Kappa Alpha Psi Incorporated, whose tonight's sponsor is the Social Action Committee for this mayoral debate. This chapter has been around since 1959, and our members have been living in Evanston since that time. Many of you don't know that. The goal of my fraternity sponsorship tonight is real simple: voter education. And this is consistent with one of our five fraternity objectives, which is to inspire service in the public interest. So Malika, I take the time away from me and give it back to the candidates. I'm going to turn the mic back over to you so we can begin.
Okay, thank you so much, Keith. Thank you, thank you. And thank you to Kappa Alpha Psi for sponsoring this tonight. I love it when the community comes together and we just collaborate and work together. That's what it's all about. And I want to introduce everyone to my team tonight. I have Venicia Mayo Burton. She will be our timekeeper tonight. So you will see this beautiful woman popping up saying 1 minute, time, 15 seconds. So you all know who she is. She's our timekeeper. Make sure we stay on track. And then we have her beautiful daughter, India Rose. She will make sure we have no disruptions tonight. So you all please be sure to stay muted because she will remove you if she has to mute you one too many times. Okay, because we really want to hear the candidates and learn as much as we possibly can. Okay, so we're going to get started here. All right, so I want the candidates to take 60 seconds to not only introduce yourself to Evanstonians, but I want you to name one thing that makes you different from your opponents. Why we should vote for you over your two opponents. What makes you so different? Okay, so let's start with Lori Keenan.
Thanks, Malika, and thank you, Keith and Kappa Alpha Psi. And thank you also for helping to deliver the Biden-Harris win with the Divine Nine. So I wanted to say, for 22 years, I've lived in Evanston. My husband and I have raised our 3 kids here. They've gone to the public schools. I've been involved in Evanston issues really since the moment I moved into town. I have always felt that local politics matter. It's why I've always been involved. 10 years ago, I helped to save the branch libraries and explore a West Side branch. We got the libraries out of the city's budget and as their own taxing body. I was also a founding member of the D.J. Coleman Foundation, which when one of our youth was shot and killed in town, we established a scholarship program for kids for further education. And more recently, I was part of the initiative to get a referendum on the ballot for saving Harley Clark, which was really about moneyed interest paying to take down a local public asset. I think the thing that sets me apart from the other 2 candidates is my literal decades of experience in Evanston issues and my care for the community and stepping up as a community member.
Okay, so that That's why we should vote for you over the other two. I mean, name the biggest thing that
Yes.
makes it different from the other two.
I would say that that's a key differentiator. I also own a small business in town, a public relations and marketing firm. And I think that those experiences and my experience with local businesses is also a real advantage, especially coming out of COVID. So I would say that those two things are really, really key differentiators from my opponents.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, thank you. And next, we'll take Senator Daniel Biss.
Thank you so much, Malika Gardner, Evanston Live TV. Thank you to Keith Terry and Kappa Alpha Psi for putting this together. My Greek is rusty, I'm afraid. I am really looking forward to tonight's conversation. My name is Daniel Biss. I'm running for mayor of Evanston. I live on Central Street with my wife, Karen, who teaches history at National Louis, our two kids who are in 5th and 7th grade at Willard and Haven. I spent 8 years of the last decade as a state legislator in Springfield representing this community, passing almost 100 bills into law on behalf of people in this community to make a difference in folks' lives, whether that was through tax fairness, budget policy, civil rights, reproductive freedom, political reform, or more. And I'm running for mayor now because I see this as an incredibly unique moment in municipal government, a chance, first of all, to come out of this COVID pandemic better and stronger and more equitable than before, and to capitalize on the moment we're going through right now, a moment of reckoning around questions of racial justice and police violence, public safety, and segregation. And I think we as a community want to do bold things. And I think we're blessed to have a strong field of 3 candidates, myself and 2 other people who I have a lot of respect for and a lot of agreement with. But I think this community right now is hungry for bold, dramatic action on things that will be difficult and controversial to accomplish. And I'm the person in this field who has a record of working in government to get things done that other folks thought would be impossible. I think that record will serve me well doing the bold, progressive, transformational change that our city needs during the course of the next 4 years.
Thank you, Senator Biss. You all are so pleasant and nice to each other, but you know, only one of you can be mayor. If we could take all 3 of you, we would. Only one of you will be elected mayor. Okay, Sebastian Knowles.
Yes, first I want to start off and say thank you, Keith. Thank you, Malika, and everyone else who put together this event. It's amazing what we can do when we all work together. My name is Sebastian Knowles. I'm currently a resident of Evanston. I've been a lifelong resident of Evanston, and I currently attend Purdue University, majoring in accounting and political science. I previously worked in the city of Evanston in the Parks and Recreation Department in an administrative capacity. Which is where I learned most of my knowledge of the inner workings of city government. What I believe sets me apart from the other candidates is that I am a product of Evanston. I moved here when I was 1 year old, and I've since then lived here, been a part of various different programs, product of Evanston Township High School and the community at large. And I think that's exactly what Evanston needs right now, an individual that knows the community inside and out, that's willing to work with people from across the aisle, from different backgrounds, racially, religiously, ethnically, and economically. We have many problems that we're facing here in Evanston, and I believe that I'm the person for the job. And so far in my campaign, I have individuals as young as 11 and as old as 78 working together in a common goal of making Evanston a better place. So that's what I think that I believe I bring to the community and to this discussion tonight. I look forward to answering any of your questions and frankly, just conversing with everyone here. Thank you so much.
Okay, so with that, I'll start. And I guess the first question will go to you, Lori, and it's because you dialed in first. And so COVID-19 has impacted every city in America. And in fact, life as we know it probably has changed forever. The next mayor will inherit in this city a divided city council, a commercial tax base that's getting smaller and smaller with businesses closing, people losing their jobs or shifting their jobs to working from home, and a raging coronavirus virus. And now we have a vaccine that needs to be distributed. So what is your vision and approach to getting Evanston back up and running? And what will you focus on first?
Well, I think the first thing that we all need to do is get ourselves vaccinated, and being able to distribute the vaccination in a way that is equitable across really all ages, all socioeconomic brackets, all races. I think that's vital, because that means our kids can go back to school. That means parents can go back to work. That means our businesses and restaurants can open. So that would be the first line of defense. We're unique. Evanston is one of 4 or 5 locations in the state of Illinois distributing the vaccine right now. So that's a bigger challenge, and that's putting taxes on our health department as well. I think as a small business owner myself, and having opened small businesses in town, both restaurants and beverage companies, and working with one of Evanston's largest employers currently as a client, I understand what businesses are going through right now. And I've had many business owners reach out to me just as a mayoral candidate and say they're encouraged by the business experience that I can bring to the table right away.
60 seconds.
I think it's important as we approach, especially COVID, that is a public health crisis, but it's not the first or only health crisis that Evanston is facing. We're facing racism, poverty, we're facing violence. Those are all also public health crises. So I think we need to take all of those considerations into account as we move forward together as a community, and not just focus on COVID-19. While that is certainly primary, I think we need to look overall at what the other challenges are that we're facing in Evanston.
Okay, Daniel, let's go to you next. And do you agree? And what's your approach?
Yeah, well, the first place where I agree is that we need to begin our focus on dealing with the recovery from the pandemic with getting folks vaccinated as quickly as possible. And Lori's right that because Evanston, unlike many of our neighboring suburbs, has a health department, we have a different role. The city government has a much more direct role to play in vaccine distribution than would be the case if we lived, let's say in Skokie or Wilmette or something. So we have to make sure that we are as aggressive as possible about getting that vaccine out the door, that we're doing it in as equitable a fashion as possible, not replicating the patterns we've seen in a lot of places where the communities that are vaccinated first are the communities that are least impacted by the pandemic. So that's something we've got to make sure we avoid. We have to have crystal clear communication with residents, so people who are understandably frustrated that they haven't been vaccinated yet understand where they are in line, when they'll be vaccinated, and what we can expect to come to us from the feds. And we need to advocate incredibly strongly for ourselves with the federal government to make sure we're getting as much vaccine as we are owed. So that's a piece of it, but of course it's not the whole story. I agree the economic recovery is going to be critical. I think that as we shift to a new form of life, right, we're not going to be living like
60
now.
seconds.
We're not going to be living like now when everyone's vaccinated, but I don't think we're going to be living like a year ago either. There'll be some different patterns of where people work and how much remote work is occurring. And I think that's going to create a real opportunity for Evanston, but we need to seize it and be really aggressive about looking to businesses that are interested in relocating and explain the benefits of Evanston to them. We also have to understand that the pandemic has created a significant hit to our city budget. Right. And so that means, first of all, again, advocating aggressively with the federal government. The Biden administration's pandemic relief plan includes critical aid to state and local governments. We need to advocate and make sure that as that goes through the process, it actually is enacted into law and we get, again, what we need and what we are owed by the federal government. And also, we're going to have to be careful and creative and disciplined in managing our own budget, because this isn't going to be easy. But I do think it's important to say that if we handle this correctly, we can come out stronger than before. And that has to be the goal.
Bastion?
No, I agree. So far, Evanston has done a fantastic job in terms of COVID and their planning for it. We've seen that Evanston has performed well above average in comparison to the surrounding communities. So it's important that we keep up the efforts that we've already started and that we remain vigilant for COVID-19. In terms of economic relief, we need to start working on communicating directly with small businesses, establishing what their wants and needs are following the pandemic, and then tailoring our economic development plan to those wants and needs. And then once businesses that are outside of Evanston see and recognize that Evanston local government is working for small local businesses, they'd be more enticed to join in and come to Evanston, bring their jobs and economic opportunities with them. So we also need to communicate with our residents in terms of COVID-19 vaccination plans. Over the summer, I worked on a case study working directly with Purdue University on a communication plan that they could communicate with the residents of West Lafayette and Lafayette, and as well as the student body. And
60 seconds.
our competition went forward and created a plan ultimately that was beneficial in keeping Purdue University's numbers down. And communication with students and the body of West Lafayette in unison. So these are very important issues that we're talking about right now, and we need to emphasize that yes, we're starting now on a pathway to ending COVID and fighting back against this virus, but we still have a lot of work to do in terms of economic development, budgeting, and ensuring that all of our residents are vaccinated in an equitable manner.
So let me have a follow-up question on the vaccination. All of you mentioned that, and I know all of you have thought about it because we've lived under a quarantine for a year now. The vaccinations here, we talked about rolling it out. Have you thought about your approach so that Black folks don't feel like they're left behind? And I really wanted to talk to get your viewpoint on how we should approach the distribution of the vaccine, because, well, I'll get off my soapbox, but I just wanted to hear from you guys first. Sebastian, let's start with you.
I think that the mayor's role and the lack of hard power of the mayor definitely puts it at an interesting position, and especially one when talking about COVID-19, that the mayor's office can directly communicate with state and local and county officials to determine who gets vaccinated first. And I think that's what's unique about our position here is that ultimately it's the individuals who live in Evanston that know which communities have been most hit by COVID-19. So it's important that we go out into the community, look at the data and see which communities exactly have been most impacted, relay that information to state and county officials, and get that vaccination plan outward.
Daniel?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Keith. I think the principle is very simple here. The people who are at greatest risk ought to be vaccinated first. And I think everyone agrees on that. Right, everyone agrees on the basic idea that priority comes with risk. And so, someone like me who has the incredible luxury of working from home and doesn't have, health reasons to be especially at risk, should be at the back of the line. And that's where I am and that's where I belong. The problem arises when different people have different definitions of what risk is, and when we're not careful enough or we're too sloppy. And so we wind up, as I said, where Black and brown communities have borne the brunt of this pandemic and yet seem not to be at the front of the line when it comes to the vaccination. And so I think we need to be very intentional and clear about defining, looking, as Sebastian said, at the data, understanding where the bulk of cases and tragically deaths have occurred in Evanston, and ensuring that that goes into the definitions that we deploy to order people in line. I'll say explicitly, I was talking to somebody who's involved in the city's vaccine distribution effort, and he was really disappointed to see that the intake form that the state gives us does not include racial information. So if we want to even take a backward look at what is the racial makeup of who's been vaccinated in the city of Evanston so far, we can't do that. We can use a proxy by looking at wards and kind of relying on our knowledge about residential segregation in Evanston, but that's the best we can do. And so to me, it's about a clear, comprehensive, detailed look at where the impacts have been. And I think we know a great deal about what the answer to that question is going to be, and then designing a mechanism to put people in order in line that's exactly consistent with that, and making sure that we collect data that allows us to hold ourselves accountable, as opposed to just having to throw up our hands and say, well, too late. There wasn't a box on the form that folks could check, so we have to kind of say there's nothing we can do. That's the priority system I would bring to this process.
Laurie? Did we lose
Lori?
No, I was muted for my dogs. I think one of the things that is an advantage right now for me in this instance is that I've actually been in communication with people about the distribution of the COVID-19 vaccination with my work. So I've already done this in sort of trying to get the word out to people about the not just the messaging, but the process and procedure, and working with CVS or Walgreens. I also think that right now in what we're facing is not just sort of a divide amongst community, with age and race, but there's also an information divide, and that is not an equitable situation either. I think that, the older adults are not able to get on a computer and to register or even get the information about it. You know, I'm getting texts from the city to sign up for getting more information, but I know that that disaffects, you know, people who might not have access to a computer or a mobile phone or a mobile device of some sort. So I think what we need to do
60 seconds.
right from the get-go is have a better communication system in place, so that we're reaching out to people in places and meeting them where they are in their churches. You know, people aren't in school right now, but let's go out to religious organizations and let's go out to community leaders. You know, for instance, your fraternity, could we access a number of individuals that we might not be reaching otherwise? I think communication and inclusion is really going to be primary in getting as many people vaccinated as we can. And unfortunately, our frontline workers, our older adults, those are some of the people who are least likely to get the information that they need right away.
Agreed.
I have a follow-up to that on the pandemic. So I love all your answers. We got to reach the community. So the Black and brown, primarily the Black community, there is a trust issue with the vaccine. That is a huge dilemma, and rightfully so. There's trust issues there. So what is it about you that we should trust that you're going to get that vaccine to us? So some parts of the city, they're actually loading up trucks and going to those communities and giving them the vaccine, as opposed to them having to get online, fill out information, see what category they fit in. They get separated from all the others and they got to wait. Some people are very proactive in other parts of the country, proactive. They're just getting out there and going to them and giving them the vaccine. What is about you, as opposed to your opponent, that we should trust you, that you're going to make sure that the Black and brown community gets the vaccine? Not just data, but get the vaccine. Anyone would like to take that first? Lori, take that one first.
Okay, so I think that Evanston right now has a trust issue overall. And I don't think that that happened overnight. I don't think that that happened with this last administration. I think that that's happened over decades and generations. And I think to overcome that right now is a tall order, but I think that this is where we start. And we start by having officials that they trust, and we start by having accountability to the people of Evanston. It's what I have tried to do for the 22 years that I have lived here. I think that as we go out to leaders in the community, whether that is, you know, religious leaders or organizational leaders, and really talk to them and get their trust behind us, that they can then deliver the message to the people who trust them. So I think that it's, you know, having built over the years in the community, the people that I've worked with, I think that I could start from day one, reaching out to some of the real community leaders in town who trust me already and who know the work I've done for their communities. And I would start with that. And I think that that's a great, trust is a great conversation. I hope we talk
60
more.
seconds.
But that's where I would start, certainly.
Okay. Sebastian.
I think I come from an interesting position because I am a member of the Black community, and I fully understand the distrust between the Black community and government officials. We've seen in the past and syphilis outbreaks and forced contamination via vaccines, and that there is sound reasoning for the Black community to be scared and quite frankly, afraid of vaccination efforts. So I believe that in order to really reach individuals that are worried about the vaccine, it requires a boots on the ground approach. Over the summer, I was a part of an organization called the Black Male Alliance, where we went into communities where we saw an increase of gun and gang violence, and we just walked around, had conversations with residents there, explained to them what we were doing, that we were there to facilitate conversations and show that we were there for residents and that we would listen to whatever concerns they have and advocate for protections and much more. So I believe that that's exactly the approach that needs to be taken in this situation, is that we need a mayor that's going to go out into the Black and brown community, have these conversations with residents, sit down with local leaders, and discuss what exactly goes on in this vaccination program to solve any problems and fears that Black community members may feel. And then we will see increased participation from the Black community. Thank you.
Thank you, Sebastian. Senator Biss?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's two different, both really important questions here, right? There's the one that Sebastian just answered, which is, you know, if you look at the history of this country, when the US government comes to the Black community and says, I've got a medical intervention and I'm here to help, folks are understandably anxious. And so there's that question of, is the vaccine itself trustworthy given the history of the US government and healthcare and the Black community? The other question is, how can you trust us as candidates that we're actually going to make sure we get it done in terms of delivering the vaccine in an equitable fashion, as opposed to just paying lip service? And I'm going to answer that question first, because I thought that's what you were getting at, Malika, but if you want me to talk with the other one, I have to do that too, because I think they're both great and important questions. But in terms of why the community should trust me to actually do the work required to make the vaccine truly equitably available, I would just say, please look at my record. I spent 8 years in the legislature and fought on a number of issues that were equity-related issues that I ran toward because I knew they were important. Things that weren't in the newspaper,
60 seconds.
things I didn't get a lot of credit for, but things that I knew really mattered. Like, for example, I fought very hard to make sure that the Illinois state pension funds were investing their assets with a truly diverse collection of different businesses, because that kind of contract could be a make or break contract for a small Black or brown owned financial firm. So that's an example of a project I took on knowing that that was a place where we could achieve a real equity goal and it was worth fighting for. I spent time in the legislature fighting to make sure that we mandated that police departments issue racially disaggregated data about traffic stops, because I knew that was a place where we could make a real difference from the point of view of actually enacting equity in day-to-day life. So this is a value system that I have been willing to step up and fight for a long time. And my guarantee to you, Evanston, is that if I'm elected mayor, I will continue fighting in that role to make sure that our vaccine distribution mechanism is fully equitable.
Time.
So we're going to switch to a different topic, unless Malika, you have another follow-up question in the COVID. And I want to switch to the city budget. I'm sorry, Malika, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go to the next category.
So, you know, as I was doing my due diligence to moderate this session, the proposed fiscal 2021 budget is $299 million with all funds and interfunds expenses accounted for. That's an $8 million deficit compared to last year. Some people in this community say that we have a city council governance problem. And so what do you think about that? Is that a true statement? And then how do you plan to mitigate concerns or change the situation? Because as mayor in this city, with a city manager and a city council, you got to shepherd a divided city council. So what do you say to that? And how do you handle such a huge problem of an $8 million deficit? And let's go with you first, Sebastian, since you dialed in second.
Gotcha. It's a wonderful question. So budgeting in Evanston has been inherently flawed for the past 2 decades with this kick the can down the road mentality. And my push so far in my campaign has been to try to find new revenue streams that Evanston can tap into without hurting low and middle income residents. One of such has been the research we've been doing into Northwestern and their lack of contribution to the community. If you go to our fiscal policy page at sebastianknowles.com, you can see the numbers we laid out via the 2017 city manager report that showed that after adding up all of Northwestern's property or estimated property taxes, it comes out to about $29 million of property taxes that they're not paying. Now, it would be impossible to collect all of those property taxes, but it's something that we can come to the negotiating table with and discuss on how they can better contribute to the community and provide fiscal support or support in forms of programming.
60 seconds.
Now, Now, I believe that this is one thing that we should definitely be paying attention to, because when we talk about affordable housing or lack thereof, we forget about property taxes and the impact that that has on Evanston residents. So it's important that Evanston residents are not just shouldering the burden of taxation here in Evanston. But it's also important to recognize, however, that we have another candidate on the stage, Daniel Biss, whose time during his time at the General Assembly was plagued with issues in terms of budgeting, whether it was cutting $1.65 million or billion dollars to Medicaid or reducing pension benefits in an effort to save Illinois money that was ultimately determined to be unconstitutional. We need an individual who's going to come into Evanston with fresh, invigorating ideas of how to raise revenue without hurting the everyday person. And I believe that candidate is me.
Time.
Daniel, you have a follow-up on the accusation?
Sure, if you like. You know, I was a legislator for 8 years. I'm very proud of the record that I had. During the course of those 8 years, we had an awful budget situation, and almost everybody in the legislature chose to kind of hide under their desk and not try to engage. And I did the opposite. I did the politically risky thing of stepping up to the plate and trying to actually work our way through it. And I've been the first to admit that, you know, Sebastian's right, that there was legislation that the Supreme Court overturned. Clearly that was a mistake. I've been the first to admit that. But I would say that if you make a mistake because you're actually trying to do something different to solve the problem, that indicates a willingness to actually step into the arena and make the difficult choices. And I have to say, we're going to have
30
a lot of
seconds.
difficult choices in the city of Evanston. We're going to have difficult choices. Our hands are far more tied than I would like by the state of Illinois. And we're going to have to be prepared to really manage our way through that. The basic value system that I brought to my time in the legislature is the value system I will bring here, which is that we need to find ways to make those with the ability to pay their fair share of taxes, and then have a fiscally stable government that provides the services that people need. That's what I
Time.
think Evansonians want right now.
Can I have a chance to follow up on that really quickly?
Yes.
So when we look at, you know, in terms of stepping up into the plate, that doesn't mean sacrificing progressive values in the name of political expediency, which is what you did at the time. I'm sorry to say that taking healthcare away from lower income individuals in the name of financial security of Illinois is not beneficial. Or taking pension benefits from middle class families is not beneficial to the state of Illinois. And in the end of the day, it solved none of our problems that are currently facing us in Illinois. So
30
I see that
seconds.
as a reflection of what will be to come in Evanston. And that is why we need a candidate who understands that we cannot sacrifice our progressive values in order to gain some political expediency in the end of the day.
Yeah, I'd like to respond to that, Keith, if I could.
Okay, I want to get Lori in here too. So go
Yeah,
ahead.
I just, you know, want to say that when we're talking about progressive values, I just want to do a quick accounting of budget measures that I tried to enact in Springfield. I tried to enact a tax on financial transactions, something that has been done in no state, but I was able to make more progress on that here than any other state has done. I was able to pass out of the Illinois Senate legislation to close the corrupt so-called carried interest hedge fund tax loophole. That's a corrupt loophole that exists on the federal level that, again, no other state has been able to close, but I passed legislation out of the Illinois Senate to do that. I give these examples not because they're directly applicable to what we could do in Evanston, but to demonstrate that I was
30
not
seconds.
only generally speaking working in support of progressive values, but innovating again and again, trying to figure out fair ways to tax people who were wealthy, who could afford to pay, consistent with progressive values in a way that would actually bring in the revenue that the state needed. And that's the approach I'll bring to the city. We're going to need that level of creativity. We're going to need that level of innovation. And yeah, we're going to need those progressive values. And I think my record in the legislature is very, very clear on that.
Lori, let's go to you. Same question. Some people in the community say we have a city governance problem. What do you think? And how do you plan to mitigate those concerns or change the situation given our $8 million deficit?
Well, I guess I'd like to first respond to something that Daniel Biss was saying. I don't think that values take away promised benefits from people. And I don't think that Mr. Biss's experience in Evanston or in the legislature was beneficial to Evanston at all turns. He was willing to sponsor a bill or to be behind a bill that was going to take away $6 million from District 65 schools and $2 million from 202. And doing it because we were part of a region that was going to be impacted, but we had such a range of needs in our community that wasn't taken into consideration. So I don't think when we're talking about values in the legislature, we need to be talking about values that are impacting Evanston residents. I've spoken on the budget. I've been involved in many, many discussions over the years in Evanston that affect and impact Evanstonians. And I have always spoken up at every citizen budget hearing, practically every budget hearing, I'm there on the side of the people asking and questioning our city council, why are you spending these dollars, including
60
this
seconds.
when I asked, why are you spending these dollars at a time when families are being priced out of town, when people have lost their jobs, and people are trying to stay in their homes? So I think that when we're talking about values and we're talking about functioning city council, I've built consensus over the years in town, and I've had some really successful ventures doing it. So I think that I can lead a council to consensus that is also beneficial to the residents. And I think that that's the experience that I've had. It's something I've already done, and I look forward to doing it as mayor again.
So I have another question.
Wait,
Let Daniel Biss, Senator Biss, you got 30 seconds.
there's two different things I'd like to do. One is respond, but also could I answer the original question too? Or is that window closed?
Malika?
Yes.
All
Yes,
right.
Senator Biss, yes.
Okay, so let me just first respond to Lori, because I think this is a really, really important thing. Illinois has one of the worst school funding systems in the country. It is an outrage and it is a crime. And it's an attack on poor and Black and brown children across the state. And I knew going into the legislature, representing an affluent suburb, that it would be difficult for me to take on that issue without rousing up a lot of controversy. And yet, when I was called upon to work on that, yes, I stepped up to the plate and actually worked on school funding reform. And because of that work that I did, we now have a school funding reform system in place that is a massive improvement that works better for District 65 and 202 as well. It would have been the easiest thing in the world for me to duck that issue because it was politically safe, but I didn't do that, and I'm proud of it. And that's the kind of mayor I'm going to be. This stuff we need to work on when it comes to public safety and housing and climate. It's not going to be uncontroversial. It's not going to be easy. And in me, you're going to have someone who's willing to take on difficult, controversial things, even when it's politically risky. I'm proud of that.
Okay, great. So my follow-up question, or my next question on that vein, because we've looked in the past and we've looked at what has happened in the past. Going forward, the mayor is going to inherit a budget, and I am sure you guys have looked at it. So my question is, what are you willing to sacrifice to make up the difference? There are going to have to be some hard decisions, and we're talking weeks away from the election. So I'm assuming that you guys have taken a look at the budget. So my question is, what are you willing to sacrifice, and what visionary plans do you have to get us to a balanced budget? Because unlike the federal government, we have to balance the budget. They don't. So what is your approach to that? And so Daniel, you get the first question, and then we'll go from there. What do you say? And then we'll go to Lori and then Sebastian in the order of which you dialed in. So that's why I went that way. So Daniel, what do you say to that question?
I appreciate it. And I think it's a really well put question. And I think that what we need to look for is not just, hey, here's something that could be easily cut without people feeling a difference, because there isn't much of that left in city government. What we need to look for are ways that we could restructure city government and give ourselves a better product, a better quality service at lower costs. And I think the clearest area of opportunity there is public safety, where if you think about the last several generations, our reaction to problems of violence, our reaction to problems of public safety has been to further militarize our response, essentially. And what that's done is it said, we're going to use expensive tools to address problems in ways that are less appropriate than actually the right way to handle them. So for instance, if we spent our public safety dollars on mental health services as opposed to traditional policing, on substance abuse treatment services as opposed to traditional policing, there are ways to shift the way that we serve victims of violent crimes away from traditional policing, and more. All of that could be done in a way that would actually get us a better quality of public safety, true shared
60
safety for
seconds.
all, as opposed to security for some. And we would do it at a significantly lower cost simply because of the very, very high cost of traditional policing. Now, doing that will be difficult. Doing that will be a gradual process. We'll have to beef up those other services that will be the places to which we deflect some of those traditional policing responsibilities, but it can be done. And if we do it properly, we'll wind up better off in terms of what the city is delivering and doing it at a lower cost. That's what we ought to be looking for.
So when you say public safety, I just want to make sure I understand. Is that code for police reform?
That was not meant to be code, but it is police reform. It is
Okay.
absolutely police reform.
I just want to make sure. Okay, Lori?
So I agree that there are a number of places that we can be looking to certainly improve the efficiencies of our budget. And I would immediately call for a forensic audit of the city's budget for at least the past 5 years. We've kept our budget below a threshold that hasn't allowed outside auditing. And I think that everybody in Evanston deserves to know what's going on with the budget. I think we've spent frivolously on $8 million lawsuits for Robert Crown. Again, I go back to having spoken on the budget a number of times. Very recently, I spoke at a city council meeting about $150,000 that they were going to spend on a parking survey. So I've been in the weeds in Evanston and I've paid attention to these numbers over the years and I know them. But I also think that we need to be looking at, again, police reform. There are communities like ours, very much like ours, Somerville, Massachusetts, and Eugene, Oregon, that are policing their communities for tens of millions of dollars less than Evanston is spending each year. So I think that we should be looking to models. There's an organization that I'm part of called Strong Towns. I think we need
60 seconds.
models that other communities are using successfully in these other communities that we could be implementing in a way that we're not over policing Black and brown communities, that people are truly safe in their neighborhoods, but not because of a stronger police presence, but because they have better after school care, better child intervention programs, better youth services for our young adults to be doing things after school and participating in the community. So those are some of the places that I would start, but some of the inefficiencies that are handed down from city staff to city council, which become policies that are budgets that are just crazily out of line for what the existing residents of Evanston truly need. I think that needs to stop immediately.
Okay, Sebastian.
Yeah, during my time at the Parks and Recreation Department, I saw firsthand a lot of frivolous spending, individuals who were making more than what their job required them of. And I also saw individuals who were working multiple jobs, but for the same salary. So we've seen that Evanston government especially can be pretty inefficient. It is a bureaucracy after all, and bureaucracies are inefficient. But it's up to us to go in line by line, department by department, to see where frivolous spending is taking place. And it does take place in Evanston. So there is room to cut there and go through that budget. But also I wanna echo what both Lori and Daniel have said so far in terms of public safety and restructuring our police force. In my police reform packet on our racial justice page on my website, I talked about the CAHOOTS program in Eugene, Oregon, and how it's an alternative emergency system. And they've saved Eugene, Oregon, $8.5 million per year for the last 4 years because of the calls that they've siphoned off from the police department and fire department. So there are various ways that we can cut spending and reallocate those funds and make Evanston as a whole more efficient to provide better services. But again, this reflects back to my last response when it comes to Northwestern, is that we have an entity here in Evanston that needs to contribute more financially. They contribute via the Good Neighbor Fund, but currently after accounting for fire services, they really only account for $400,000 worth of contributions, which in comparison to the overall university and the tax burden on Evanston residents is not enough. So it's important that we go through the negotiating process so we can go forward in making up that deficit going forward.
Okay, my follow-up question, is this: the city, how would you grade the last, not necessarily the last administration, but the city council, because you are going to inherit a divided city council and you're going to have to work through them. And when I say city council, I'm including the mayor's office, the city manager's office, as well as the aldermen as well. So given that, how would you rate their performance? And then how do you plan on managing that group of people? Because all three of you come with a history. Daniel, you come with a history of being a state senator running for governor. Sebastian, you're a college student. And Lori, you've been involved in city government for a long time. So each of you come with your own brand, so to speak. But my question, and I hope that the listeners agree, how will you work with the city council to get things done? Because at the end of the day, that truly is how you're going to get it done, because the mayor's office is not like the president. You need to work with them. So let's go with, since it's the third question, let's go with, did I go all three, or let's go Lori on this one? Lori, so what do you say, Lori? Or did I go Miss Daniel?
I'll answer it. That's
all right.
So I would say that I think that the people who are running right now in this race is sort of grading the city council. We've got 30 different people who are in the race running against a council that I think they don't agree has done a good job for the people of Evanston. I am proud not to be supported by 7 of the 9 sitting council members, because I think Evanston frankly needs a change. And I think that's what the people of Evanston are begging for. I think it's the high number of incidences of Freedom of Information Act doubling in this last administration. People don't feel like they are being heard. So what I would start immediately doing, and I think that people trust me in town, to have my ears open. I've always built consensus. I've always built collaboration. We've had some successful movements in town. And I feel like a grassroots city council, I would certainly encourage everyone to look at who is challenging the incumbents this race, because that's going to be a really important part of how we come out of this.
60 seconds.
I think that in working with the council as a mayor, I would look to my business skills. I've managed people, I've managed budgets, we've gotten successful things done in my business and in Evanston. So I think that if I were mayor and working with some new council members who were encouraged to do good things for the community, I think it could be fun and exciting, frankly.
Okay. Sebastian?
I would personally grade the current city council quite poorly in terms of just civic engagement and being engaged with the community. When I started my campaign back in August, one of the first issues that was brought to my attention was the fact that the first resident that I ever knocked on their doors, I talked to them and they said, I feel as if I don't have a voice. I have no one to talk to. I can't ever reach my alderman. And then I've never seen the mayor in 4 years. And that to me was a problem. And it showed why exactly Evanston has failed in terms of being engaged with the community. Under the best of circumstances, I would like to see a new city council be elected in April, but obviously that might not be the case. So it would be up to whoever becomes mayor to work with whoever's in office. And I believe that in order to work together and facilitate community engagement, we have to get back to the basics of public engagement and public discourse.
60 seconds.
Going out into the community, holding meaningful conversations with residents. I pledged at the beginning of my campaign to hold weekly town hall meetings, and I would invite any alderman, any city staff, the city manager, whoever, to come to those town hall meetings and have those one-on-one conversations with residents, because that's how we build up trust. Because news spreads fast. If residents feel as if their elected officials are paying attention to them and speaking to them, listening, most importantly, then they'll go tell their friends, they'll go tell family, and the news spreads. And it's that civil engagement, that public discourse that will spur more community involvement and will, in the end of the day, cause us to work together better. I've had extensive experience in the Parks and Recreation Department working together with various leaders, whether they were up in the senior levels of the department or just the average everyday counselor. So I know exactly how to bring individuals together, and I believe that I'm the person for that job.
Okay, Daniel? And Lika has a follow-up after you answer.
Yeah, I think the question was really well put, Keith. You asked about the divided council, and I think that's the story here, is that we have an incredibly divided council, and that has held us back as a city. It's held the council back, it's held our community back, and it's held our city government back. And I think the job of the mayor is not, respectfully, to accept that we're going to have to live with the divided council, but instead to try to unite the council. And I think this is really an area where there is a pretty stark difference between myself and the other candidates. I am proud to have the endorsement of 7 of the 9 council members, as well as to be endorsed by Opal, which was founded by another of the council members. And I don't agree with any of those folks about everything. They don't agree with each other about everything. In fact, I have an endorsement from the council member who votes no most often, as well as endorsement from council members who tend to be voting yes. And what I think that shows is that the divisions that exist right now can be bridged if we have a leader who's prepared to listen respectfully to all sides, to include every voice at the table, and then to unite people around the progressive vision that's really what the people of Evanston, I believe, are looking for, which is bold progressive action on things like climate,
60
public
seconds.
safety, climate, public safety, housing, and more. And by the way, I would add, I don't only have the support of current members of council, I have the support of several members who are running against current members of council and challengers as well. And I think that's what we need. I think we need someone who can bring this whole community together. I think if we walk in, if any one of us walks into the mayor's office having declared a list of sworn enemies, having said, these are the people we are here to vanquish, then we are signing ourselves up for 4 more years of this kind of fighting. If we have 4 more years of this kind of fighting, we're going to have 4 more years without the progress our city needs. I believe I'm the person to bridge those gaps. And I'll say that I did that in Springfield. It was tough passing legislation in Springfield, and I had to bring a lot of different voices from all over the state together, but I was able to get it done there. I'll be able to get it done here.
Lika, you had a follow-up.
Okay. Speaking of divided council, we had issues with the city clerk's office, to the point where they even took FOIA out of that office and gave the responsibility to many other FOIA officers, in which case it slowed down FOIA getting out to the public. City Clerk Devon Reed was stripped pretty much of his power. He was stripped of his staff. It was just a very ugly situation with the city council. My question, and many are wanting to know, is how do you all intend to deal the city clerk's office if you're elected? Will FOIA be put back into that office? What do you intend to do to repair what has happened? Lori, you want to take that one?
Sure, I'd love to. So I think it was terrible and wrong when Devon was stripped of FOIA responsibilities. I think the city did it to cover itself because they were going to be part of a lawsuit. And that made the suit moot by stripping FOIA duties from Devon. In fact, I felt so strongly about it that I spoke up about it at the time. I think that when you're taking FOIA responsibility from the city clerk and you're giving it to the police and you're giving it to the legal department, that's putting the fox in charge of the hen house. FOIA is freedom of information. Until Devon had that office, I didn't know what the city clerk was really doing. Rodney Green never did the things that Devon did in that office. He enlightened and made that office transparent for the people of Evanston. And it is probably part of the reason that FOIA has doubled. But people in Evanston know what's going on now, but only because they've asked. So I think Devon being stripped of the FOIA responsibilities was a terrible thing. It was an injustice that I spoke up about at the time, and I would immediately want the FOIA responsibilities to go back to the city clerk as they should be.
Sebastian?
So I believe that the city clerk should have FOIA powers restored. And I think that the issue regarding Devon Reed is really highlights how the city council has acted in the past 4 years, that they've been detrimental to some of the successes of Evanston. And they have caused issues and grievances that have gone unresolved, which is why I think it's more than okay to criticize the city council and not agree with them. It's not making a list of if hated enemies that we would want to get rid of. No, we are public officials and public servants in the end of the day, and we should be able to take criticism, especially if it's warranted. Now, I see the city clerk's office as being an entity that is able to provide information to residents, increase accessibility, and ultimately advocate for positions that residents feel are most important. The city clerk is a citywide office similar
60
to that of
seconds.
the mayor. They're elected, and I believe that they should have a voice when talking about certain issues. They have an ability to go out into the community, talk to community members. So it's imperative that the city clerk is able to do their job in an effective manner and be a part of civil discourse here in Evanston.
Thank you, Sebastian.
Daniel?
Senator Biss?
Well, to the direct question of how, as mayor, I plan to treat the clerk, I plan to treat the clerk with respect. And by the way, with the deference due an independently elected official, just as I won't manage the council, they don't work for me, they work for the residents who elect them. I won't manage the clerk either. They will not work for me. They'll work for the city, the people of the city of Evanston who've elected them. And I think that respect, both for the individual and for the independence of the elected office, is really critical. As for FOIA, I think, let's be honest here, it's pretty hard to think of a compelling reason to have an independent elected clerk, if not to serve as a check on city government. And situating the FOIA function inside the office of clerk, I think, is an important and good check. So I do support returning the FOIA responsibilities to the office of the city clerk. And I also anticipate having a strong relationship with the city clerk, whoever is elected in April. I also want to say that the notion that we need to have some internal component of the government that is independent of city council and the mayor and is able to act as a watchdog or a check is important. And I think we ought to look at
60
other
seconds.
models. I think we ought to look at other models as well. For instance, we ought to explore whether it's possible to create some version of an inspector general's office, which I know to do a full inspector general's office like they have in Chicago is beyond our fiscal means in Evanston, but are there ways that we could come close to that, to situate true investigatory authority and audit authority and independence inside a component of city government that's insulated from political pressure? I think we need to be looking at creative ideas like that, because I do think, back to earlier questions, trust is frayed in Evanston right now. And we need an entity that we can count on to give us information that we trust, that will help us judge city government in a way that we believe.
Go ahead, Keith.
Okay, so my next question, because I know Malika wanted to open it up for public questions. The mayor sets the vision, or should have a vision, of the city. And it's my indictment that the city of Evanston doesn't really have a strategic plan. And so if you believe that, so my question is two parts. What is your plan to have a strategic plan or a vision of where their city should go, and not be reactionary to some of the big issues that come up? And then how do you plan to roll reparations into your vision? So please don't give me a reparation response. Talk about the strategic vision and reparations, because I want to hear about both, because both are important to the vision of the city. Because we did some historical things with reparations, and I think we could do some historical things on the vision side. And with that, I think I went Daniel first, but let's go Sebastian this time.
So in terms of, vision, we see that Evanston is ripe for change in terms of racial equity, climate action, mixed income housing, otherwise known as affordable housing, among a cluster of other issues as well. So I believe that all of these issues can be tackled in the first 4 years. Obviously, the work has to continue from that point onward, but we can set the stage for building upon all of these issues and building solutions that will positively impact Evanston for years to come. And I think that starts in a conversation of an economic development plan for Evanston, a roadmap that Evanston government can follow for the next 10 to 20 years, highlighting racial equity programs, climate action, implementing CARP, the Climate Action and Resilience Plan, putting in affordable housing into our economic development plan, And this roadmap will allow the residents and the city government to adequately plan for the future. It
60
adds
seconds.
accountability and transparency to the whole process as a whole. Now, when talking about reparations, I agree that we have been on the forefront of the conversation about reparations, and I'm extremely proud to be in a city where that's taking place. But I believe that we need to go further than we already have. We need to provide more options in terms of actual reparations. We have residents who feel as if that homeowners assistance is not enough and that they should not be told on how they should be able to spend their money. So going through increasing the amount of dispensaries we have, and as well as expanding options for qualifying residents is definitely a concern of mine when facing reparations.
Daniel?
Yeah, I think the question is right on the money. I think we need to articulate a clear vision, and we need to then put in place a plan behind it. And I want to be precise on the plan part first. We have a climate action and resilience plan, and that's really important. Then the challenge is implementation. Huge challenge, but a concrete challenge. But around our other key values of affordable housing and equity and transforming the way we do policing, we don't have clear plans in place as a city, not to mention, as Sebastian continually and rightly points out, economic development. And without that clarity of a plan, we wind up, as you say, Keith, reactive. So to me, my vision of this city is first and foremost an equitable city, which is to say a city where the inequities that currently exist now in wealth and health and housing and education and more have been done away with. My vision is for a city that leads the country on climate action. My vision is for a city that's rethought the way we do public safety. And we have a vision of public safety that's about shared safety for all and restoration, not about security for some. My vision is for a city that's affordable. And that means affordable for middle-class families that are trying to figure out how to stay here, affordable for the working poor, affordable for the working poor, affordable for the many people who look at this place and say, I would like to come, but I can't afford to move there. And so I think we need to be clear in our campaigns and subsequent to being elected about what our vision is. And so when I led off in saying my vision is of an equitable city, reparations is a tool, a critical tool, a tool we ought to be darn proud of, but a tool to address the massive inequity. Specifically, it's a tool to address the racial wealth gap as is caused specifically by housing. I think we need to be proud of that and implement it properly. We need to see it expand over time, and I have ideas of how to do that. But we shouldn't get confused about whether or not we've solved our equity problems by implementing reparations successfully. There is lots more to do in terms of changing our policies around those issues I talked about, like housing and so forth, and also internally, making sure our government is making its decisions based on equitable considerations.
Lori.
So I guess I go back to prioritizing Evanston residents. Over the years, I've seen Evanston be reactive and not have a plan for moving forward. I think we had a city manager who took us in a wrong direction for almost a decade. I think it's decimated our downtown. It's made Evanston not livable for the people who live here now. And I think that we need a plan to move forward. I think that I bring that creativity. I think I've had the success doing some kind of really innovative and big things in town. I've gotten the support of 27,000 Evanston residents on a referendum in every ward in Evanston. I think how that ties into reparations. I attended a reparations subcommittee meeting this week, and I think that reparations is wonderful, and it is amazing that Evanston is going to lead the way. But like the city of Evanston, there's no really concrete plan. So we're trying to build a house without having the drawings and without having the materials. We haven't thought it all through. And I think before we can start to move forward on some of these things, we need to really take a step back and look at who's being impacted and get their input. Right now, the reparations, the people who are going to receive reparations aren't happy with the way that it's being set up. So there's already a divide. So I think we need to all come back to the table, work together on figuring out what does this look like in a way that's beneficial, that people trust it's helping them, and work together. And this is some of the work that I've already done in town, and I would look forward to doing it again going forward.
Okay. Malika, you had a follow-up.
Yeah, I have a follow-up on reparations. Yes, there's many people who are not happy with the way that it's being rolled out. We are very proud that Alderman Robin Ruth Simmons became the pioneer throughout the entire country to even bring reparations to a real conversation. But then others started having input. So you all speak of equity in terms of reparations, but what it's rolling out to look like is not looking like equity to many residents. It's looking like the banks are going to walk away the winner on the backs of the Black community again. So it takes us back to systemic racism. So in speaking to many of the city council, you know, they are gung-ho for the housing program. The housing program, the money doesn't go directly to the residents, it goes to the bank. How are you all going to impact this? Because it's probably still going to be on the table when we get the new council in. Many people do not want it to roll out in the way that it is being rolled out right now, because Evanston won't come out strong in it if they go with the housing program the way that it is, because pretty much 10 families are going to benefit, maybe, if they get qualified. Why should we get qualified for reparations? One, answer that. Why should we get qualified for reparations? And two, what are you going to do to make them go back to the drawing board to make sure that we come out strong, because we are the pioneers in reparations right now?
Who gets that question?
Daniel Biss.
So I would, with respect, question part of the premise of that question. I don't think there's anybody in Illinois who has been more harshly critical of the financial sector and the banking industry than me. And I would love to rethink all of homeownership in America so that we don't do mortgages that are enriching private banks that behave badly. But that is the system of homeownership in this country. And I don't think that starting our reparations program in the context of homeownership is a bad idea. And here's why. We need to explain this program to the community and sell this program to the community. And a lot of the pushback comes in the form of, well, hold on, wait, why do I owe reparations if I didn't live here, or if it wasn't, I did not do the harm that needs to be repaired? And we have to educate people about that. And the answer to that question is really compelling, which is the city of Evanston has done harm through its actions on behalf of all of us, whether we lived here or not at the time. The city of Evanston that perpetuated segregation.
60 seconds.
The city of Evanston that perpetuated segregation, did harm, and destroyed Black wealth through its impact on housing. And therefore it owes reparation to repair that harm in the arena of wealth and housing. And so I think it's sensible to start there. I don't think that's the end of the story. I don't think it should be the end of the story. I don't think that Alderman Simmons thinks it should be the end of the story either. But I think you've got to pick a spot to begin this path-breaking program, and starting by saying, let's talk about redlining, let's talk about zoning, let's talk about the city done segregation, and then let's use that as an explanation for why to start with housing. I think it makes pretty good sense. Now, as for qualification, again, my vision of reparations over the long term does not require someone to apply and check 1 million boxes and get qualified. And I would very much guess that that's also the case with Alderman Simmons. There's a limited amount of revenue to start. There's a limited amount of political will to start. And I think they start in a sensible place. Now we got to grow it.
Okay. Sebastian?
So since it's two parts, there have to be at least some qualifications. Obviously, if you moved from, say, California a year ago, you may not be able to qualify for reparations in Evanston, just because we can only really focus on Evanston residents who have been here for an extended period of time. So there have to be some qualifications in reparations, because we just don't have the resources to just shell out money. But kind of talking about what Daniel Biss just said, we should not be having to sell the idea of home ownership reparations to Black residents, especially in particular. It's the idea that we should be going into the community and having conversations with Black residents and seeing exactly what the help they need is. I recently talked to a business owner right on Church and Dodge, and she said that she qualified for reparations. She fit into that qualifying factors, but yet her house was paid off. She had no interest in renovating her house, and therefore, she had no way of collecting any of that or those
60
reparations.
seconds.
And she said, why can't I take that money and go renovate my business or pay my bills so I can put that money aside and build my equity my own way? So it seems wrong to me that the city of Evanston, who is the one perpetrating redlining, segregation, not to mention police brutality, issues when it comes to beach tokens even, that the city of Evanston should be the one telling individuals who qualify for reparations how they should go about spending their money. That is a problem to me. And that's, before we even begin to roll out this program, we need to go back and have those conversations and see if this is a pathway forward that we want to go on.
Lori?
Thank you, Lori.
So I actually, I signed a petition. The Tina and Renee Payton, whose mother was an alderman, started a petition on change.org about reparations and true reparations, that it has to be no strings attached. The people who have been done the harm should decide where the money is spent, and they should decide what is truly reparations, not the person or the entity that has historically done the harm. Why would we trust them to say that this is how you spend your money? It would be like giving someone a stimulus check and saying, well, you can only spend it for a new car. Well, if people have lost their jobs and they're losing their homes and they can't buy, kids' school supplies, whatever it is, we can't say to them, here's how you should be spending that money. Reparations, true reparations, is giving money for them to spend in a way that they think that they should spend it. It should not be geared towards homeownership or whatever else the city of Evanston wants to do. So I think while it's great that we've talked about reparations and we're moving this forward, I think it's amazing. But we can't do it like Evanston has done so much in the past, which is sort of in a bungled stutter stop, where we're not doing the right things. Let's get out and listen to
60 seconds.
And let's listen to the Payton sisters who have done affordable housing for generations. And let's talk about what reparations truly looks like to the community of Evanston. And don't start to hand down things. We all understand that home ownership builds wealth. But if this community says that that's not how they want reparations, then we need to be listening to that. And we need to be adapting the plan in a way that lets them contribute to the conversation. And that's where we should be starting with reparations.
Okay.
Did anyone have a response? Anyone?
I'm just a little worried. I don't think we have any disagreement about values here. I don't think we have any disagreement about what the definition of true reparations is here. And I don't think we have any disagreement about our goals here. But I think I just heard two candidates essentially say that they would go into office and derail this program. And I think that is a recipe for disaster. I think we need to roll it out carefully and meticulously in an inclusive way while listening to the community. But the notion that we would get this far and then completely pull back and start fresh, I think runs a very, very serious risk of winding up with no reparations program at all, as opposed to one that needs
30
to be built
seconds.
on. And I would be very, very, very cautious and careful about that. It would be heartbreaking if that was the outcome of this kind of discussion.
Sebastian and Lori?
Yeah, can I respond really quickly? Because this has been the issue that has been plaguing the Black community for so long, that we have individuals who won't go the extra mile to actually provide services for Black families. So this is a prime example of such, is that the Black community is saying that this reparations program is not enough. Like so much the city has done for the Black community in the past, it's not enough to meet the needs of those families and those individuals. So it is up to us to go into the community, have those conversations, and tailor the program to them. Why are we giving them a program and saying, here, this is what you get, take it or leave it? To me, it's
30
dumbfounding
seconds.
that that's something that we would do as a community that strives to be so diverse, so liberal, so left-leaning, but yet we are putting Black families and Black individuals in a box and saying, look, this is what you get. In the end of the day, you either take it or you don't, and you move on with your lives.
Okay, Lori.
Yeah, so I'd really like to respond. I don't think that anything that Sebastian or I said about reparations is saying that we would derail it or take it away. I think what we were saying was we would strengthen it. We'd strengthen it with community input. I would be very suspect and call me cynical, but the guy that's taking money from real estate developers talking about development and being able to invest reparations money in development sounds a little wrong to me. I think that what we need to do with reparations is give people the money that we said we were going to give them and set up a program and a plan that has had community input and move that forward. There's no derailing there.
30 seconds.
Well, I think,
Oh, go ahead, Keith.
no, I thought everybody responded.
Oh,
And I think-
Lori had 30 seconds left. Did anyone
Oh, I see. Sorry.
want to respond before we go on?
I kind of do want to respond, actually.
There's 30 seconds.
I mean, first of all, the allegation that I have some kind of stake in reparations is outrageous and frankly flabbergasting. But I'll just leave that aside. The question is, of course, we have to do this while listening. Of course, we have to do this in an inclusive way. There's been an attempt to do that already, and of course, more has to be done. The question is, are we going to try to move forward and build on what we have, or are we going to try to first tear down what we have? Because my fear is that if we first tear down what we have and then hope that we can some other time build something better later, I've seen this happen way too many times. The later often just never shows up, and that would be a tragedy.
Okay. Thank you.
Can I respond for a minute, Malika?
Okay,
think-
30 seconds, and then we're going to
Okay.
open up to the residents.
I think saying that something that takes time is taking it away is wrong. I think that when we can admit to ourselves and the community that it's a bold idea and we're just doing this and we're the first people to do it, that maybe we got it wrong out of the gate, and being able to adapt that with more input, I don't think there's anything wrong about that. And I don't think we're trying to derail a program. I think what we're trying to do is build it stronger with more buy-in from the community so that we can have true success coming out of the gate, rather than
30
distrust,
seconds.
rather than a distrust or a misunderstanding or the community not buying into it. I think that it's really important to get this right, and telling people how they can spend their reparations money is not getting it right. So I think until we really have community input and buy-in, that we can move forward from there. I don't think that we're taking anything away. I think what they did was not right and not true reparations. So let's start with something that is right and true
Time.
with the consensus of the people.
Okay, we're going to give Sebastian 30 seconds, and then we're going to open up to the residents.
No, I would just like to echo what Lori just said, and that she's entirely right on the premise that we have done a wrong, or the city of Evanston has done a wrong in the past, and we need to fix it. And we need to provide at least options for individuals to choose from, whether that's rental assistance, entrepreneurship grants, homeowners assistance, or a direct stipend that they can collect. That way we are helping senior citizens who live in senior living. We're helping renters. We're helping those homeowners that already have their homes paid off, but have a Black-owned business here in Evanston. There are so many different factors. And to
30
say
seconds.
that we can't put off reparations for a year or two as we iron out the issues, it doesn't make sense to me. That, you know, we need to go into the community, take the time and effort to listen, and create a reparations program that is true reparations that everyone can be proud of.
Okay, great. We're going to open it up.
Yeah, we're going to open up to the residents. Travis Washington has the first question. Travis, you?
Oh, can you hear me?
Yes.
Can all the candidates hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Well, hello, my name is Travis Washington. I'm the creator of this policy called the Hands Up Act. It's a policy where if a police officer shoots somebody in the arm, it's a mandatory 15-year prison sentence. A petition has received 2.7 million signatures. Michael Brown's mother supports it. Tamir Rice's mother supports it. Breonna Taylor's mother signed it. And Jacob Blake's father has signed and supported. So I want to know, it's a two-part question. Do you support the Hands Up Act? And if you are mayor, how would you help the Hands Up Act? And for the first one, it's like a yes or no. And the second one, how would you help?
Okay.
If you want me to repeat the question, I will.
Who are you directing it to first?
Oh, to any of the candidates that want to take it first.
Okay. Senator Bish, you can take that one, and you each get 60 seconds.
Yes.
So I haven't read this in detail, and my instinct is to be supportive. I always want to be very careful about supporting mandatory minimums of any kind. I fought hard against those in the legislature because they're a big instrument of mass incarceration, but this is a pretty important exception for very obvious reasons. And so my instinct is to be supportive. Now, obviously, as mayor, we'll be able to reach out to our state legislators and our federal congresswomen and encourage them to pass legislation. But I don't think we should end our effort at police accountability there. And so I've come out for having a citizen police accountability board that has real teeth in this community, that has the ability,
30 seconds.
has subpoena power and the ability to initiate investigations, to discipline officers and to fire officers if need be. And by the way, a board that's made up of folks who are independent of law enforcement. So there aren't law enforcement or relatives of police officers on that board. I think we need to push for better policy like what you're talking about, but we also need to institute the policies that we can on the municipal level to have true citizen resident police accountability. And that's what I support moving toward.
Sebastian?
So I did take the opportunity to read that years past, but going through it, definitely something that I would support. And I believe that working with state and federal officials to put this out into Illinois and the nation at large is definitely a step in the right direction in terms of policing the police. But I think that it's important that at a local level, we're going through our police department, first off, to look for any officers that hold any inherent biases and that do not fit what we say is the character of Evanston.
30 seconds.
And that if they don't follow those benchmarks, then they won't be in the police department anymore. And we fix our hiring practices so that we have the most qualified individuals that are willing to serve our communities. And when we look at training, et cetera, that we can fix the way we police here in Evanston and move forward in a more equitable manner overall.
Okay, and Lori?
So Travis, thanks for the question. I believe that Sebastian hit the nail on the head here, and I would go a step further. In fact, Jacob Blake Sr. just spoke in Washington on this policy about police using excessive force, about no-knock warrants. There are a number of issues that are problematic, and the things that happen on a national level often have a very local impact. In the case of Jacob Blake, that is just immediately measurable. So the Hands Up, I would support that. I also think that we need to look at Evanston police
30
practice.
seconds.
In Evanston, when an officer pulls a gun, that is not qualified as excessive force. And I don't know why that would not be excessive force. So I think that we need to really look holistically at how we police and who we police. And if this helps to implement that, if the Hands Up policy helps to prevent some of these things from happening, then I would be in support of it, certainly.
Okay, thank you so much for the question, Travis. Aaron Foster?
You have to unmute yourself, Aaron. Yeah.
Okay, I should be unmuted right now. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. I'd like to switch. I know we've been very heavy in talking about reparations and other things like that. And I do thank everybody for those questions. It's awesome. This is actually, I had a bunch of questions y'all already answered. Everybody's been great. Here's where I'd like to go. I'd like to go to Evanston's business temperature. As a person who owns a business in Evanston, which is Evanston Magazine, I've seen that there are a large number of gatekeepers, which historically Black people have run into, gatekeepers. And this money is funded by our taxes. So my question is this, and there are other organizations like this, but this one is specific to us because we need that. We need this to be paid attention to, especially by the mayor's office and the dais. What's your impression of how the organization Downtown Evanston is doing in its support of the Black community, seeing as they've received $624,000 from our tax money? And I'd like to start with Sebastian.
Okay. Sebastian?
So I will admit I'm not completely familiar on the topic. So I don't want to go one way or another. I'd be happy to look it up, or if you want to talk about it one-on-one, we can talk about it further as well. But I do think it's important that when we talk about Black businesses in Evanston, that we're talking about it, one, in the lens of equity, but at the same time, promoting Black businesses, and especially our downtown area. We see that a majority of our Black businesses are away from the downtown area, and that results in Black members of our community not being able to actually go to the downtown area. Why would you ever go there if you have no interest there?
30 seconds.
So reaching out to Black businesses and encouraging them to move to the downtown area, whether that's in the forms of grants or various other opportunities that the city can offer in order to spur development downtown. I have promoted various programs that can take place during the summer months to inspire and encourage businesses to move into the downtown area. So I think looking at that with a lens of equity, breaking it down and encouraging Black businesses to come in is definitely something that we want to achieve.
Lori?
So as a woman business owner myself, I understand the complexities of this issue. And I've had small business owners reach out to me and say they're so encouraged that I'm running. I think, and Aaron, I think I know probably what you're talking about. The city spends a lot of money with a certain media outlet in town, which is essentially the mouthpiece for city council. And I think that that's wrong. And I think that a lot of the money that we're spending on a special, it's called an SSA, a special service area, which is what downtown Evanston is. And they've just implemented one at Central Street. I think that those things can be helpful.
30 seconds.
In the case of downtown Evanston, you know, I was downtown Evanston trying to get signatures on a dance Thursday night. And I was hard pressed to find a single person who was down there who was an Evanston resident. So I think we need to be designing programs that are actually helping Evanston businesses and helping Evanston residents. And I don't think that the way that's being done right now is very efficient.
Thank you.
Daniel? Senator Biss?
Daniel is fine. So look, I have not been made aware of specific conduct on the part of downtown Evanston that's problematic in this respect, but if there's stuff that we ought to know about, please share it with us. What I can say is that the results speak for themselves, which is that there are very few Black businesses in downtown Evanston. And that's a problem. That's a fundamental problem of equity, and it's a problem of opportunity in our community as well. And so I think we need to address that in terms of the programs that the city has in place to support entrepreneurs. We have to work on that in terms of the partnership with various, not only the SSA, but the various nonprofits that are supporting workforce development and entrepreneurship. But I also think that we need to make sure that we're putting pressure on financial institutions to make capital available to entrepreneurs of color, because there's a massive gap in terms of access to capital between white entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs, particularly in the Black community, but more generally entrepreneurs of color. And the city, after all, we're an important vendor for some financial institutions. We shouldn't be willing to do business with banks that aren't willing to lend in the Black community. And that's one place where I think we could really use leverage to improve this problem.
Well, my question was more towards, well, you guys absolutely answered it, but it was more towards how they're doing, also including the white community, because most of the businesses downtown are not flourishing and we're spending a lot of money. But I thank y'all, and y'all have answered my question as best you could, and I yield the microphone.
Okay, so we have, what, 3 people that have raised their hands? And
Thank you, Aaron. Next will be Dale Greenwell.
Hey, good evening, everyone. Thanks a lot, candidates, for sharing your thoughts about this important mayoral election. So I'm a longtime Evanstonian, and my question is, where are you all, and any of you can answer this, on a STEM school in the 5th Ward? We've talked a lot about reparations, but I don't think that we can omit that, and maybe it can be wrapped into a reparations package. So I'll mute and listen to your answers.
Who do you want to start with?
We can start with Sebastian.
So I've been in strong support of a school in the 5th Ward. I think it's of utmost importance to one, bring up the property value of the area. If there's a local school in the area, it brings up the property value naturally. But it's also an issue of equity, as the 5th Ward is the only ward that does not have a school in it. So it's definitely something that I agree on. I know that the effort to put a school in the 5th Ward was shot down previously, but I believe it's a conversation that we can continue to have. It's a legitimate conversation, and I believe that it will only bring more benefit to the Black community that lives in the 5th
30
Ward.
seconds.
That these are residents that care about Evanston and care about their children and their education. So it's important that we're delivering the best form of education possible for all Evanston residents. And if that includes bringing a school to the 5th Ward, I'm all for it and all in support of it.
Daniel?
Daniel Piss?
Yeah, I strongly support it. I think it's a profound injustice that we don't have a school in the 5th Ward, and it's something that has really deep ramifications, right? Of course, it has educational ramifications, but it has social ramifications. A neighborhood school brings a neighborhood together, and it strengthens community bonds, and it makes it easier for people to know one another and support one another. And so I think that having a school in the 5th Ward is a justice imperative in the city of Evanston, and the idea of having a STEM school in the 5th Ward, I think makes a lot of sense. I think it's important to say, even though we're not running for school board, there's not going to be a school in the 5th Ward without partnership with the city,
30 seconds.
without the city helping to make sure that we're making the changes around land use and zoning that make it possible. And to me, it's an important priority. I want to move toward a vision of a 15-minute city where everybody in the city of Evanston can get to the things they truly need in a 15-minute walk or bike ride. And that means a school and a store to buy healthy food and other essentials. And a 5th Ward school is just absolutely where you have to start.
Did everyone answer that question?
I have not.
Okay,
Lori.
Lori.
So I am so fully in support of a 5th Ward school that I actually have helped to connect two people that I'm hoping can get this done. About a year ago, Henry Wilkins came to me because he had heard that I could run a successful referendum in town. And he said, can you get a referendum on the ballot for a 5th Ward school? And I said, I think I could, but I think I can introduce you to a guy that might be able to do it without that. So I've introduced him to a man from an organization called Equity Schools. This is what he did. This is what he does. He successfully put together Baker Demonstration School. He just opened a school in Detroit. He does it through a non-linear funding model that wouldn't
30
cost
seconds.
taxpayers any more money, and it can be a successful thing. My kids went to Kingsley and they had the benefit of a diverse population at Kingsley, but I don't think that kids in schools that they can walk to should benefit from the diversity by having other kids bust from their community to ours. So I think that everyone benefits from a neighborhood school, and Evanston would benefit from a neighborhood school. The metrics for better scores and more participation and better outcomes are so strong, and I just can't speak highly enough about it.
Thank you all.
Many people in the community believe that that first 400,000 of reparations could have started the process to putting a school back into the 5th Ward. That was one of the things that was on the table that got pushed somewhere.
I actually worked with Henry Wilkins to try and get a grant from the Evanston Community Foundation in writing a proposal to try and get some sort of seed money to explore the process. So I'm really hopeful that that can happen for Evanston.
Okay.
Great. And
All
I think the next question is going to go to Mike V.
Mike Basilko.
Thank you very much.
Nick Song is next.
Thank you very much. So the city of Evanston has a real problem, the current government has a real problem when there's something embarrassing, they like to keep it quiet and not discuss it. So at Robert Crown, not getting into the conversation about its excessive cost, but uh, because of some pressure from potential donors, uh, the city decided and all of the elected officials voted to go ahead with the installation of an artificial turf system. So the problem with that is both health and environmental risk concerns. The artificial turf has an infill product installed that, in short, contains chemicals that are considered carcinogenic. So that all of those playing fields at Robert Crown, which sit over the storm sewer holding area, can have this product littered throughout the fields that children play on, and there's a national debate over the use of this product, which is proven in laboratories with laboratory animals to cause cancer. So the issue is, without delving into all of the details, what would the next mayor do to hold elected city officials accountable, those who actually voted, knowingly voted to install this product? How would you hold them accountable? And those people include all of the aldermen, the mayor, the city manager, the director of Parks and Recreation. All of these people fell in line, and the fundraising arm of Robert Crown also pushed for this installation. How do you hold them accountable
Okay.
when these problems start to occur with children potentially becoming stricken with cancer?
Okay. You guys have heard the question?
Like Daniel will start.
Okay.
Yeah, well, one thing I want to be very clear about is that the mayor is not the boss of the council, and in that sense, I will not be holding anyone accountable, though God knows, obviously, if the city is responsible for a toxic hazard, the city should voluntarily assume responsibility instantly, and that's the direction that I would go as mayor. But I think your basic point here is really, really important, and the question is, what should our attitude be toward potential toxins or other hazardous materials being used in any aspect of city functioning or other things that the city approves? And I think we have a belief in Evanston that we ought to hold ourselves to a higher standard, right? So for instance, coal tar is a highly harmful sealant that's
30
used
seconds.
and used in pavement around the state, but the city of Evanston banned coal tar. I think that was a good decision. Right now we're using sand from the Outboard Marine Corporation Superfund site on our beaches. And I think we have a responsibility, even though it's legal and the feds are okay with that, for us to do extra testing to make sure that that's really safe. I'm proud to have the endorsement of the Sierra Club in this race because they've seen the commitment I have, regardless of pressure, regardless of if it potentially increases costs, to make sure that we're complying with strict environmental standards and holding ourselves to a much higher standard than is just the bare minimum.
Okay. Lori?
Thanks for the question, Mike. I was actually at a city council meeting when a gentleman came to the mic and implored the city council not to use, it's called EPDM is the material that's being used. And it's like an artificial turf material, and it's filled with this rubber that is toxic. And his daughter had contracted cancer. And I looked into it a little bit more, and kids who were goalies were more likely to get cancer because they're on the ground on this material. In fact, I do sustainable construction with one of my clients, and EPDM, when they're doing remediation, it counts for sustainability points to take this material off a work site. That counts
30
as
seconds.
a sustainable product. So the fact that we put it knowingly on our fields for kids to be playing on, felt to me at the time like a lawsuit waiting to happen, but also why would we do that to our children? Why are we building new fields in this grand and glorious Robert Crown Center that's going to be toxic to children playing on it? So I have a big concern about that. And I think that holding accountability is one of the things that I'm running on. And I would really look to a council to make better decisions in the future.
Okay. Malika, who's up?
Okay, and next we have Nick Song. Thank you for that question.
Can I answer the question really quickly?
Oh, I'm sorry, Sebastian.
No, it's all good. Don't worry.
Sorry.
No, I was just gonna, reiterate what Lori said. I myself am sensitive to various types of turf fields, so I know that there are inherent risks with using turf. It's hard from the mayor's perspective just because the mayor does not hold a lot of hard power, especially if it comes to disciplining aldermen. That's not something that the mayor's job really entails. So it's hard to go back retroactively and discipline or hold anyone accountable for their actions. But we can look towards the future and say, well, look, we need to investigate whether or not this will have underlying health impacts to our youth. But we also need to look at any programs going forward and recognizing that we need to look at every single material that we use when building a new public building or building a new walkway, that there's a number of health impacts that could be caused by our project. So it's important that whenever we're going through a project, we're taking the time to meticulously go through and analyze each item that's used to make sure that we're not causing any harm to our residents.
I'm sorry, I would just say that somebody has to be held accountable. Thank you.
Thank you for your question.
Thank you for the question, Mike. And our next question is from Nick Song.
Hi, yeah, thanks so much for doing this event. Back in the fall, after the Northwestern University community cops protests, the mayor issued a statement just, requesting that the university pay for, I think, $88,000 to cover the cost of officer overtime. I'm wondering what your reactions to this are. Would you take similar steps if you were in that position? And if you are elected mayor, how would you handle a situation like that in the future?
What do you want to get the question?
Who would you like that to go to? Nick, who do you want to address that to first?
Sorry, Lori, if you'd like.
Sorry, I have two dogs that like to bark in the background, so I mute myself. So I know the situation, and I think that it was certainly unprecedented. And I don't think that the city has ever given Northwestern University a bill for services rendered. I think that where we need to start is where we are right now. I think that it was probably not right to do it. But I think that there's a lot of duplication of services, and police is one of those areas. So I think going forward, I would certainly try to have a better understanding going forward with Northwestern University, better town-gown relations, so that we would sort of set up scenarios where if something like this were to happen, what's the protocol?
30 seconds.
Forward together, and how can we work more collaboratively towards sort of a less animosity within the relationship?
Okay. Sebastian?
I do want to emphasize that the city of Evanston does charge Northwestern for overtime, which is where that money was coming from when the current mayor suggested that Northwestern foot the bill for police overtime during that protest. But I do want to emphasize that Northwestern does need to be contributing more to the community, whether that's financially or in the forms of programs that can help residents. We've seen before, and I've laid this out in our Northwestern contributions packet, that Northwestern gives $1 million to the Good Neighbors Fund, but then proceeds to pay for fire services via that Good Neighbor Fund. Therefore, you're left with less than half of the money in the account, which comes up to around $400,000 on a yearly basis. Now, we need to go back to the negotiating table, talk with Northwestern students, elected officials, Northwestern administration, and Evanston residents to sit down, come up with a comprehensive plan forward and a pathway forward on Northwestern Evanston relations that can be beneficial to both parties in the end of the day.
Daniel?
I think the problem, well, there are many problems, but the problem that comes to mind first with this situation is that, with all due respect, the president of Northwestern University mishandled this situation and escalated it. And as a result of that escalation, there was a need for Evanston to spend more money out of pocket. And so because of that, I think it makes sense to go back to Northwestern and say, listen, this is a tab that y'all sent us with because of choices you deliberately made. We would ask you to support our ability to pay that tab. But going forward, let's just be clear here.
30
in a
seconds.
situation like this, where the university and the city have a complex relationship, we ought to be working together on the front end. And I think Lori is right. We need to change the tone of the relationship between the university and the city and have a collaborative relationship so that when faced with a challenge like this, we can solve it together instead of wind up escalating and kind of throwing a hot potato back and forth. And we're going to have a new mayor in a few months, and there'll be a new president of the University of Northwestern before too long. I think that's an opportunity for a reset and an improvement in the relationship, and that's something that I'm committed to making happen.
Time.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you so
7:50.
much. Yes, we're at 7:50. We want to stay on schedule and respect everyone's time. Thank you also. Those are some great questions. Thank you to the community for engaging and getting to know these candidates. I want to give each candidate 60 seconds to give your message, who you are, why we should vote for you for mayor of Evanston. Okay, let's start with Sebastian.
So again, I want to thank Malika, Keith, rest of Evanston Live TV, everyone for putting this event together. And I appreciate everyone coming here tonight and listening to some of our answers and asking the important questions. As I said in the beginning, I'm a product of Evanston. I've been here for my entire life. And I'm proud to say that Evanston has created me into the man I am today. And I'm more than happy to serve this community for the next 10 to 15 years, if voters so wish that to be a thing. So I believe that's exactly what Evanston needs, is a leader that will be here for the community day in, day out, no strings attached, no prior experiences that
30 seconds.
that may inhibit the ability to lead Evanston. And I believe that I am the candidate that can bring transformative and transparent change going forward. That it is my time and my generation's time to take the mantle of responsibility and lead communities across the nation. And that my campaign has been more than just me. It's been a movement of individuals of all different backgrounds. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sebastian. Lori Keenan.
Thank you, Malika and Keith, and to your organizations and all that you've done tonight and for the community in general. I believe that I have been involved in Evanston, and I will commit to staying involved in Evanston in whatever capacity. I don't want to be the mayor. I want to be your mayor. I have worked hard for this community, and I have shown up and spoken up. I would like the opportunity to try that from the other side of the dais, where we can build consensus with the community using the skills that I've done out in the community and getting the people's voices better represented by their council members with more accountability, more transparency, more equity, and moving us forward in a way that is creative and beneficial to all of the community members, which is what I've done over the years. I think I've got a track record of success in town, and I'd like to continue that in a position where I can really affect a change more within the community and for the people. Thank you.
Thank you, Lori. And
Daniel?
Yes.
And also, thank you so much for the conversation tonight, for the opportunity to have this back and forth. I thought it was really instructive, and I appreciate it very much. You know, I'm proud of the record I established in the legislature. I served 8 years. I passed almost 100 laws and made difference for people in Evanston in a lot of different ways. And you actually heard tonight that folks went after me for some of the stuff that I did in Springfield. And frankly, that's what happens when you're willing to take on tough issues. That's what happens when you're not scared by political controversy and you're prepared to move forward even when it's difficult and even when you get some blowback. I think we need that in Evanston now because we've got a lot to do. I have a bold vision for rethinking public safety, climate change, housing, a fundamentally equitable Evanston, and a fundamentally transparent Evanston. And
30
the
seconds.
only way we're going to get that done is with someone with a bold vision and the ability to bring people together. I am proud of having the endorsements of 7 members of City Council, the 2 living former mayors, our congresswomen, state legislators, the Sierra Club, our county commissioner, OPAL, the Organization for Positive Action and Leadership, and more. I'm proud to have hundreds of volunteers and many hundreds of donors from Evanston, folks coming together to try to build a movement to transform our city. I'm asking you to join me because I know that together we can accomplish a lot these next 4 years. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much to our candidates. Thank you so much. Again, you all, each of you bring something really powerful and amazing. And I know this race, we've got a ways to go. It's pretty much the beginning, but I'm loving what I'm seeing from everybody. So thank you so much. And thank you to our residents for engaging, and a special thank you to our sponsor, Kappa Alpha Psi, Keith Terry. Keith.
Can I say 3 things before
Yes,
we?
most definitely.
So I'd like to thank Evanston Live TV and again all of the listeners for attending tonight. And so on behalf of the Social Action Committee of the Evanston Alumni Chapter of Kappa Alpha Psi, I thank you for attending. 2 more things I want to say. Henry Wilkins, Dale Greenwell, and Ann Foster, you heard from them tonight. Those are proud members of the Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity Incorporated. And what we are trying to put on is just one of the 5 objectives of this fraternity, and it is really to inspire service in the public interest. With that said, we also, my fraternity chapter, we have a foundation called Paul W. Kane Foundation, and we're going to be putting on health seminars, and the first one is February 20th. I say all this to say we are not endorsing any candidate. We are here to educate voters, to make people smarter, and to do our goodwill. So look for Paul W. Kane Foundation. That is a foundation of Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity. And with that, Malik, I'm gonna turn it back over to you. Thank you for allowing us to sponsor this. And I hope people walk away understanding who the mayors are, who your candidates are, and why you're voting, how you're voting on voting day. So vote is in question. And I hope tonight you were enlightened more than you were before you came on. So thank you. And I hope this was educational. So Malika, I turn the mic back over to you.
Okay. Thank you so much, Keith. Thank you to Kappa Alpha Psi. Thank you all so much for tonight. And thank you to our engineers, Venetia Mayo Burton and India Rose. Thank you for helping us out. I couldn't have done this without you guys. Thank you. And please, everyone stay engaged. This election is just really getting going, but it's getting going with some fire. And that's what we need at a time like this, the climate that we've been in. We need fighters, and all 3 of these people to me are fighters. So thank you all. Stay engaged. Stay tuned here at Evanston Live TV. We do have the forum coming up February 16th for the city clerk office. That's going to be quite interesting. And we have more candidate individual interviews. So please stay tuned here at Evanston Live TV. And you all please be safe out there. Keep your masks on, keep your distance still. And let's get through 2021 and let's bring about some change and some definite hope. Thank you all for joining Evanston Live TV, and stay tuned.
Bye, everybody.
Bye. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Bye. Thank you so much.